Whereas Section 2.2-311 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the Buchanan County School Board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. I'll speak louder. Okay. Now therefore be it resolved that the Buchanan County School Board hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, one, only public business matters lawfully exempted from an open meeting requirement by Virginia law were discussed in closed meeting to which this certification resolution applies, and two, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the Buchanan County School Board.
Do I hear a motion to approve the certification of the closed session?
Make a motion, we approve the certification of the closed session.
Do I hear a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Sweet. Congratulations. Reverend, please ask the pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Comments. Do we have any school board comments?
I'll start. Yeah, I just, now that we're in the second week of school, I appreciate all the hard work by each individual school and its administration and teachers for getting things moving quickly, and for the superintendent and his staff as well for making the opening of school a great reality for us based on what has happened a year ago. And so I'm just excited for the opportunity, and everybody's moving forward. All our athletic teams are doing great to start the year. And so I'm proud of the coaches for persevering through the summer and through all that has happened through this pandemic to allow them to continue to build student athletes in our community and in our schools. So thank you so much, Dr. Nichols and your staff and all of the principals that are here to get us off to a good start this year.
I had the opportunity to visit all 4 of our schools last week. Took a walk through. Also had the opportunity to visit the elementary school, and the state superintendent visited, which was also a nice opportunity. I was able to talk to several administrators and teachers, which was good to get a feel for how things are starting up. And I was able to observe students in their classes, and they were already focused on learning. You know, from kindergarten to high school, they were engaged. It looked like they had been in school nonstop. They were into what they were doing. So that was really pretty inspiring to see after having spent last year in unusual circumstances. So while things are certainly not back to normal, I definitely want to express my appreciation to both the families, the students, the teachers, and administrators in making education happen again. And I think one of the most important comments I got from one of the teachers at the elementary school, she said, you know, the heart is back in our building. And, you know, she was so engaged and excited about that. And you could tell and that everybody felt that way. So look forward to our year continuing to be successful. So thank you.
And just to close, I'd like to thank Dr. Nichols, the leadership team, the teachers, administrative staff, and the families and the students for a successful first week of school. You know, it's moving forward. It's certainly going to be challenging, but, you know, really appreciate your leadership.
And I'll just add, I think the bus drivers, the cafeteria workers, and our school nurses who are doing a great job. Definitely doing a lot more than they usually do at this time. So my thanks there.
And I echo all of my colleagues' sentiments. I, on a personal note, have a young son that's in school, and he is very excited to be back in the classroom. I really appreciate members of our community who've reached out with words of encouragement and support. So I just really am thankful for that as well. But many thanks to all of our administrative team as well as our teachers and team members. So any comments? from
And
you?
I have a presentation a little later, so I'll reserve some of those comments, but I am also a father of a senior, and he's off to a good start, both at Bridging Communities and New Kent High School. So I want to say thank you as a parent for all the work that's been done to get this school division ready and to have a successful start.
So now we move on to the consent agenda. You've had some time to review the minutes and the bills and payroll and the superintendent's recommendations regarding the personnel members. Do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda items as presented?
I move we approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Do I hear a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next, we have citizen comment. So during citizen comment period, before we begin, I would like to note that comments are limited to 3 minutes. Once the timer sounds, please promptly finish your comment and return to your seat. It is customary for the school board not to make comments during the citizen comments. Please make sure your contact information is provided on the sign-up sheet if you would like someone to follow up with you. Thank you for coming out this evening. First up, we have JB Benson.
JB Benson, 3902 Homestead Road, Lenexa. Madam Chair, with your permission, I'd like to relinquish my 3 minutes to the next speaker.
Next speaker is Tom Miller. Would you like to edit that time to 6 minutes, please? Yes, ma'am.
Members of the school board, Dr. Nichols, my name is Tom Miller. I live in District 5 at 14400 Winding Grove Lane, Lenexa. I would like to address 4 issues tonight regarding the New Kent County Public Schools and this school board's recent actions. The lack of a vote on requiring masks to be worn by all K-12 students. Number 2, Senator Donovan and Peterson's August 17th letter to Dr. Nichols and possibly to you as school board members. Number 3, requested information not being provided. And number 4, community involvement in our public schools. Number 1, this board did not vote on the mask policy, but instead the superintendent posted a video that stated masks would be required for all K-12. At the August 23rd work session, you did not vote on this issue, and several of you addressed why. But there was no decision made by the school board. You allowed the superintendent basically to make that decision. We did not elect Dr. Nichols. We elected you, the school board members. We expect you to make these decisions that affect just about all the K-12 students. Most school boards in Virginia have voted on this issue. In fact, several have voted several times on this issue. So I ask you to revisit this issue, make a motion one way or the other, allow discussion, and then take a vote. We need you to be on record on this issue. The second item, on August 17th, a letter was sent to Dr. Nichols from Senator Donovan, a Republican, and Senator Peterson, a Democrat, regarding the legislation, Senate Bill 1303, that the governor used to issue his instructions to the Department of Health on masks. I am not sure if the school board members were sent copies of this letter. I do know through Senator Donovan's office that it was sent to Dr. Nichols. What concerns me is that there was no discussion of this letter and a potential impact on the decision made in New Kent on masks at your August 23rd work session. I just failed to understand, as much interest as there has been in this subject, that a letter from 2 senior senators that sponsored that bill 1303 was not brought up and discussed by this school board as it related to the mandate for masks. Next item is I requested information on August 27th, over 2 weeks ago. This morning, I met with Dr. Nichols. We discussed that. I would make a statement because you guys have probably been in his office. The emergency phone went off, I think 3 times. And I volunteered to leave and take whatever it was. And the other phone went, and it's obvious that he is he's earning every penny that he's paid. However, the things that I requested were the minutes from the August 9th school board meeting and the August 23rd work session. I cite the Virginia School Board Association's policy that says draft school board minutes are public documents and are to be provided to the public when requested. I also cite the Code of Virginia under the Freedom of Information Act, which says draft minutes are public information and need to be provided when sought. I look forward to receiving that information along with the script that was used and Ms. Winford at the August 23rd work session. The fourth item I want to address is public involvement. Loudoun County, Prince William, Fairfax, they're in the news almost every day. One of the school board members from Loudoun is appearing before a judge, that might have happened today, to explain to that judge why she should not be removed. I'm happy to say that I don't think we have those kind of issues down here in New Kent, and God bless all of us for not, and I commend all of you for that. But schools and school boards and school actions have risen from obscurity to extensive interest. The fact that you had 5 people submit applications for District 5 temporary appointment is telling. Some of you probably ran on write-in campaigns. And you know what, you wonder for a long time whether anybody really cared. Well, I can assure you now that people care and they're interested. But some of the things that I'm seeing from this board is a little bit distressing. You guys meet twice a month, not always. You have a meeting once a month and you have a work session. You don't always have a work session. And our District 5 school board member made a motion to allow a few people to speak at the work session. There is no policy in your policy document that forbids that. That's just past practice. That motion failed on a 4-to-1 vote without any discussion. So I fail to understand when you've had 40, 50 people at some of these meetings. I don't know how many you got tonight. You've had a dozen, you've had people speak, and you denied them the ability to speak at the work session. I would ask you to go back and establish a policy that allows the same type of public input at the work session that we're doing tonight. That work session, the last one, didn't last an hour. So you're not going to go, a whole lot of more time. I don't see why you can't do that.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Miller.
Am I on my 6 minutes? Thank you.
Next up, we have Fran Kennedy.
Hello, do you need my address?
If you want to provide it.
No, I'm Sarah's neighbor. She knows where to find me. So my name is Fran Kennedy. I have a degree in early childhood education and elementary education. I've taught in the schools for many years. I'm the mother of 4 sons and 2 granddaughters. Thank goodness, they were granddaughters. My concern is masking children. And does anybody, I feel like science has become so political, and has anybody stepped back and said, what's in the best interest of our children? The psychological effect of wearing masks. As an elementary school teacher, I know that facial expression is huge in teaching, and we're taking that away from children by masking ourselves as teachers all day, and then the children being in masks. And I just, obviously very opposed to the politicization of COVID and the fact that children have to wear masks. I just want to read an article from the Wall Street Journal, and not the whole thing. The discomfort of it is the title of this article. You can look it up online. Is the case against masks for children. It's a commentary. The discomfort of a mask distracts some children from learning. Masks can increase levels of carbon dioxide, can exacerbate anxiety or breathing difficulty for students. Facial expressions are integral to human connection, and I stress that is so important. For young children especially, who are only learning how to signal fear, confusion, and happiness, covering a child's face mutes those nonverbal forms of communication and can result in robotic and emotionless interactions, anxiety, and depression. Seeing people speak is a building block of phonetic development. It is especially important for children with disabilities such as hearing impairment. The adverse developmental effects of requiring masks for a few weeks are probably minor, but we're looking at long-term. So I am pleading on behalf of children that need to come to school and learn. I happened to go to a restaurant the other day and I happened to sit next to a table of teachers. And they were lamenting in one of the elementary schools here, how some children don't even know the basic phonics of a long vowel and a short vowel. This is horrifying to me. The children, they had to do virtual learning last year and now they're in masks. And what are the long-term effects about this? What about kids that come from homes where they're not supportive to their education? I feel like teachers need to do everything in their power to teach children how to read, how to learn, how to have critical thinking skills. And I just think the masking needs to be looked at from the psychological health of a child. And is there a specific metric that we're using as far as to when masking is going to end for children? I know you can't answer, but I would like to know what the metric is that we can say we're done with masking children. So again, I just feel like on behalf of children, especially children that come from challenged homes where education isn't prioritized, and who have maybe emotional needs, and we're masking and they can't see the smile of a teacher, that breaks my heart. I just think that's wrong on every level. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Mark Daniel.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. What an honor it is to be with you again. Mark Daniel from New Kent. I'm also going to speak on behalf and to the issue that I would like this board to take a vote on. Last meeting, when it was over, several of you gave some comments that you didn't like the way things go, but that's the way it is. I propose that you have a responsibility for your constituents to show them how you stand on this issue. Earlier, there was made reference to a letter by the two senators from Virginia, which I don't know that you've seen these, but at the last meeting, it was talked about the lawyer's advice, but I've never seen anything in writing. I don't know if things were given to you, but I want to quote. I will tell you that Dr. Donovan is an MD. He's a Republican senator, and Senator Chap Peterson is a Democrat. He is a trial lawyer. And this, I'm reading from their letter. Your superintendents, to respond to those of you who have reached out for clarification, the idea that the school board is risking liability if it does not choose a particular strategy to mitigate COVID-19 is flawed on many levels. First of all, school boards as elected bodies enjoy sovereign immunity, which insulates them from lawsuits based on actions they take as public officials within the discretion laid out in our bill. Second, any potential plaintiff would have to show they suffered actual damage approximately caused by the school board's decision to adopt a certain strategy. Put simply, he would have to show that he had been taking all reasonable steps to avoid COVID-19, been vaccinated, yet still contracted the disease, hospitalized or died as a result. I am, in fact, I'm a Virginia trial attorney. I'm not aware of a single successful civil action to date against a private Virginia employer based on damages flowed from its failure to implement a mitigation strategy. The idea that such case can be proven is against a public school system is simply not realistic. So again, I call upon you, our elected people. That is your role, not the folks who that work for you. It is your role to make policy for this school board. So I call on you tonight because I see no empirical evidence given when this mandate for masks came down from the governor or from the health commissioner. None, nothing was given to me. But I have seen where they say, well, these things at best may be 10% effective. That means 90% ineffective. They do have harm. They do cause harm. They are It's my opinion that you need to take and treat people just how you act when you go to work. Where you work at, do you make everybody from 12 down to kindergarten is where I'm at? If you don't, then you need to have the courage to do what you do at home. I'm calling you to have a vote tonight. Thank you. And I'm early.
Ron Vaughn.
Good evening, Dr. Nichols, school board and attending staff. I'm here tonight not only as an individual parent and grandparent, but also as a representative of the majority of New Kent County residents who are concerned with the overreach of government, be it federal, state, or local, into our freedoms as citizens. Collectively, as superintendent and school board, you have accepted the responsibility to provide a quality public education to our children and to maintain qualified instructors and administrators. You've been trusted to select proper and appropriate student curriculum like factual history, mathematics, science, physical fitness, language skills such as reading, writing, and proper linguistics. But what you have not been elected or appointed to do, however, is usurp parental responsibilities. For example, you are not the health department, nor should you be the enforcement arm of the health department, even when it is used as an end-around power grab by our governor. It is not okay to indoctrinate with regard to sexual orientation to satisfy a political ideology, which can cause students to question their own God-given sexuality. In addition, we as parents have full authority and ability to decide if our children need to wear masks while attending school. Furthermore, I don't believe the policy, as we've heard tonight, has even been voted on. We believe also that our divine creator God has never made a mistake with his creation of an individual's gender, nor will he. We do not want nor expect our superintendent or school board to approve or make accommodations in facilities, sports, or in any other way for students to be claiming to be anything other than their God-created gender. We, the citizens of New Kent County, will not stand idly by and allow our school system to follow along blindly with our immorally bankrupt federal and state government and teachers' unions mandates. We are, however, poised to stand beside you and fight. Followers go along to get along, whereas leaders make positive change. Going along to get along will not bode well for any of you in the next election cycle. Thank you.
Linda Slum.
I'm Linda Slimp. I live in District 5, and I have brought with me tonight a letter that my son has written to all of you. He is not able to be here this evening because he is coaching New Kent County Girls Softball League. He is part of that. He's on the board of directors there. He's also one of their coaches. And they had a great successful day yesterday as they opened their season. But I'm going to read this letter to you just as he wrote it. So these are his words, not mine, although I do support the bulk of what he has had to say. This, to the New Kent County School Board. First, I am sorry I'm not here to deliver this message myself, because I would love to hear what you have to say. Mrs. Linda Swimp will deliver this to you. Both of my children attend New Kent County Public Schools, elementary and middle school. For the last 18 months, we have been cooperative and tolerant of forced mandates on these poor children. For 18 months, we have been told, listen to the experts and follow the science. At this time, I would strongly advise the members of this board to do just that, because so far you have not. Not a single one of you can produce a single shred of evidence to justify forced masking of our youngest population. Not one of you can show me or anyone else any data showing the efficacy of young children masking. The data does not exist. Here is what I can tell you. My 5-year-old will suffer because of these absurd mandates. It is proven that young children need to be able to see people's faces, not only for their healthy mental development, but also for education, word enunciation, and learning proper social cues received through facial expressions. My child's immune system will also suffer. You also require a mandatory 14-day quarantine after notification of a potential exposure to COVID-19, even after multiple negative tests are produced. Care to defend that flawed logic? Instead, you sit here on your panel and tell me that my son and daughter should be muzzled for their own good and for the good of others. Your staff has had the opportunity to be vaccinated, and that means we're done here and the conversation is over. But no, here we sit watching you in this political theater go on. The CDC has flipped on this very issue so many times to not be counted as trustworthy. There are countless studies showing that mass mandates do not work anywhere at any age group. And by the way, who in hell are you or the CDC or the officials in Richmond to tell me what's best for my children? You do not know them, you never will. It seems like you have forgotten why it is you sit here in front of us. It also appears that you forgot your work for the people of New Kent County. If you are not here to do what is best for my children and everyone else's, step down, and I and many others will be glad to take your place. Watching my kids and others suffer at the hands of some spineless politicians is disheartening and outrage invoking. I'm almost finished. You know the mandates are wrong. You also know many of the teachers and staff do not support these mandates. You know that to have it, you do not have to enforce this in our children's schools. I expect you to stand up and represent the people correctly.
Ms. Slimp, thank you for your comments.
Thank you for your time. Signed, Nichols Slim, a pissed off, fed up parent and New Kent County High School graduate class of 2006. Thank you.
Reverend Milton Hathaway.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the school board, Dr. Nichols. I'm Reverend Milton Hathaway, and I live at 9001 Crumpsville Road in Quinton. And I am the chair of the Political Action Committee for the New Kent branch of the NAACP. So I'm here in two roles, one as a pastor and then as a community leader. We really look to you to make critical decisions for our schools and to make sure that every child has the opportunity to learn in a safe and secure environment. That is a difficult task. Much discussion, I really hate labels, but much discussion has been about how school systems deal with the issue and discussion of race and racism. I'm not here to tell you how to do that. I am here to suggest to you that I am a supporter of the schools. I support the decisions that you're making, but we cannot simply be reactionary when it comes to issues of race and racism. Those systems that only take a reactive approach create more problems than they resolve. We believe that there must be a proper mixture between being reactive and being proactive. And I want to encourage you to do that. Not discussing an issue does not mitigate that issue. It creates an even greater issue. And so I want to encourage you to be bold in how you deal with the issues that our students are confronted with. Last, I want to say something about this COVID. I had COVID. And there were days when I thought I was going to die. And there was literally a day when I simply wanted to die. I did not believe that death would be worse than what I was going through. I don't want anybody to go through that. I don't like this, but if this is going to help our children, it's not the total answer. Then I encourage you to do it. You've got to make those decisions. I said to my son when he accepted the position as county administrator, all you have is your name and your integrity. At the end of the day, you've got to be able to look in the mirror and recognize who you're looking at. And I want to say that for you. You've got to be able to look in the mirror and recognize who you're looking at, because our children and our community need that. Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is new business. First is the report on the opening of school and enrollment data. Dr. Nichols.
All right, and I believe as Mr. Miller is pulling up the opening of schools, Ms. Dasku, you wanted to talk about sort of board action.
Yeah, so I also wanted to address the fact that we, as the board, did send a letter to the governor's office at the opening of schools saying that we believe that the decisions for individual localities should stay with individual localities. And I'm going to ask that we provide a copy of that letter along with our minutes and agenda on our website.
Yep. So what we'll do is we'll post that letter on board docs with the presentation of opening of schools. So you find it there.
And if anybody wants to know where our meetings and agenda are, I just checked, they're on the New Kent County School Board page. It's under School Board Meetings and Agenda is a selection on there. You can go right into board docs and see those items. So if we can have that there.
We can do that. Absolutely. A lot has been said about the opening of schools. I've got to tell you, there's nothing better than 3,300 plus kids coming back in schools. Is it exactly school as we know it? No. Is it closer than it was when kids came back last year? Yes. Whether it's classroom instruction, recess, PE, you name it, we're making those things happen for kids. So we have gone through the first week, and I want to kind of take you through some of our week. This was a reminder to me. Sometimes I get caught up in the presentation just to say thank you publicly to all of Team New Kent. That's community, families, kids, and definitely the team that we get to work with. It has been all hands on deck to pull off the start of school. From transportation, everybody with the CDL driving, our director of transportation, Reverend, is here. He drove most of the first week. So anybody who could got in there to make sure that we could get kids to and from school. Our nutrition workers doing grab and go breakfast, our administrators who did plan A, plan B, plan G, and continue to revise their plans as we move forward. And the incredible teachers and support staff that we have. It's nothing short of amazing. I get an opportunity to talk to my colleagues quite often. And some of the issues that they have, we don't have because of the team that we have. So it's not lost on me, and I just want to say thank you. It has not been the smoothest 2+ years, but we continue to move forward and continue to make things happen. So just wanted to say thank you there, and then we'll move into enrollment numbers. So I don't know if you saw the news report, but the 2020 census results has New Kent still as the second fastest growing county. I know when I came here, that was the piece that we are the second fastest growing county. That trend continues as the second fastest growing county. I've signed more permissions for people to start school with us who have houses finishing in the next 90 days, which is a provision that we have. But we just have a lot of kids coming in, and it's great. Fortunately, we have a new school on the way with Quinton Elementary, which we'll talk about at our next work session. But I wanted to give you a look at enrollment numbers. These are actual children that are sitting in seats. So our number of kids enrolled in New Kent is larger than this, but some kids have not shown up and some kids won't show up. We'll find out that they moved or what have you. Just to give you an example, there were a number of kids that went into quarantine before school started. So they're not represented on this list because they have not sat in a seat yet. So yes.
Quick question, does this represent those that are enrolled in virtual Virginia?
Yes, it does. So that number is pretty small, but it does connect with that too. So thank you, Ms. Miller. Just want to make sure. So numbers have rebounded to pre-pandemic numbers. So we took a fairly significant dip last year, which we talked quite a bit about. Those numbers have rebounded. The high school has never had more kids at the high school. It is pushing 1,100. The freshman class has 311 kids in it. So kind of working through those pieces, GW is sitting at 736, New Kent Elementary around 716, New Kent Middle School somewhere between 772 and 800 right there. And then of course the high school 1084. So right now, as of today, we have 3,308 students in our school division. And that number is anticipated to continue to grow. For every one of those things that I did sign for a student to start, there are other students that couldn't start because they were outside of that 90-day window. So we know more are coming. If you drive by any of the developments in New Kent, it's no surprise that we're getting more and more kids. Just as a fun fact, for every house that's built in New Kent, we get 0.26 kids, just as a mathematical formula. They do show up as whole kids, but just if you're trying to predict future development, you have that piece there. So some pictures of our kids in action. This is from both elementary schools. So you can kind of see bottom left, kid working through the first day jitters. There were a lot of jitters for adults and kids and families, always on the first day, but especially first day with a full restart. Other group activities. This may seem a little bit small, but one of the tough things through the first half of last year was when you walk into school, there was no real student work because students were at home. So when you walk through our halls now, you get to see that student work displayed and kids proud of the work that they've been doing. Bottom middle, we did have a visit, I think it was referenced a little bit earlier. Our state superintendent visited New Kent Elementary on Friday. So that is him and Dr. Stam. Talking to some kindergartners in Ms. Sherman's classroom. So now looking at the middle and high school, you have additional pictures of the middle and high school in action. One of the cool things that the middle school has done, and other schools are doing it too, but the middle school by far has pushed a lot of their classroom outside. So that's Ms. Fleener's class in the bottom left, gives us an opportunity to take that mask break. He has English classes going outside. He has, not sure if he has any math classes outside, but we have a lot of classes pushing their work outside. At the high school, you can see labs are back, kids working in groups, and I believe it's Mr. Mead reference athletics going strong. As a matter of fact, our field hockey team is taking on my alma mater Gloucester right now, right to my left, and I hope they beat Gloucester pretty bad. So really, it really has been a tremendous start. It hasn't been without its bumps, and we'll talk about some of those bumps in just a moment. Speaking of bumps, here we go. So this is a snapshot of positive cases and quarantines in week 1. So this is 16 positive cases, which resulted in 80 additional people in quarantine. So that is really at the end of week 1 where we stand. And we'll talk a little bit more about those quarantines in a second. The schools have been doing a tremendous job of moving kids through school, doing all the functions of school, and still trying to minimize those cases. I will say, we'll talk about close contact, but right now, the way it's set up with the masking piece, if you're 3 feet apart and we're both wearing masks, we do not have the quarantine. That number would be significantly larger based on that provision.
So if I just want to clarify what you're saying. So if the students did not have masks, there would be significantly more people that would be in quarantine and not in the classroom right now.
So the masking, Short answer, yes. If you're not wearing a mask, let's take lunch, for example, because the kids are not wearing a mask during lunch. The rule is 6 feet. You have to be at least 6 feet apart, or less than 15 minutes closer than 6 feet apart. Lunch is more than 15 minutes. So lunch, you have to be 6 feet apart. So that would span to the classroom. If the classroom we're not wearing masks, you'd have to be 6 feet apart. One, we don't have the space for 6 feet apart. I will tell you that in some classrooms, we don't have the space for 3 feet apart. And some of these quarantines are a direct result of not having enough space, which some of that will be remedied, with this new school coming online and giving us room to space. Our principals have been incredible about being creative with space and space usage. And I know Ms. Barber got to see some of that in action. And we can certainly provide other opportunities to do that as well. So there's nothing like seeing our incredible team in action. I wanted to talk about a draft COVID-19 dashboard. This would be public facing and would give you a snapshot, and we'd update it once a week. So we're still working out the protocols for how and who would update it once a week. And then what would the cutoff time be? Because I was doing this data based on last week, and as I was in our sheet, additional things were falling into place. So it is just a snapshot of that data.
So Dr. Nichols,
Yes.
what does the quarantine consist of? You're out for 10 days?
Yep. Well, I'll get to that in just a second. If you'll, I believe it's coming up right after this. This is just a snapshot. We don't have 10 in each category, but this is what it would look like. It would give you the week. So the week that we just finished, here's numbers, quarantine, and this is a draft. Like, we can push on this and shift and change and so forth. We have to be very careful on HIPAA that we don't identify the individual that's in quarantine or that has a positive case. So it's rolled up data. But then, similar to data we would present at meetings last year, we would keep totals of that so you can see the total positive tests and the total number in quarantine. So that is something we look to have up in the next week. So we have that data, we have it mocked up. That box, if it's driving you crazy like it is, for me, that's down a little bit, that will shift up and be in alignment. So just in case that was on your mind as well. But we want to have that public facing as well, just so you can kind of see where we are and what we're working with. We've seen a number of school divisions have to close for a day or more, often related to staff shortages, whether it be transportation or instructional staff or so forth. We want to have a public facing arm on the number of positives and quarantines. So this is where we get to on the quarantine piece. So quarantine guidance, if you're fully vaccinated, student or staff member, you do not have to quarantine if you've been a part of an exposure unless symptomatic. Now, I say that today at 6:44 on September 13th, because as you know, over the past year, guidance has shifted. So this is where we are right now. So if you're non-vaccinated, there are actually 3 routes. So one is 14 days from exposure, which I believe was referenced, that you come back 14 days after the date that was designated as exposure, and that's without a release from the health department. Okay. In working with the partnership with the health department, you can cut that from 14 to 10 days. Okay, so no symptoms, exposure was released from the health department. There is a third way, and that is with negative testing. And with the negative testing, you can actually come back on day 8. And we have all of that outlined on our website. And I'll make sure that continues to be updated. So there are actually 3 different pathways to come back, from 8 days to 10 days to 14 days, depending on the health department and the situation and current conditions.
And the same is true for children under age 12. So
Correct.
11 and under, they're all automatically on the non-vaccinated.
Yes, absolutely.
And this guidance is coming from the CDC. This is not school specific. This is.
Correct. CDC, VDH, yes.
So exposure is defined as with the mask versus without the mask, 3 feet, 6 feet, the things that we talked about previously.
Correct.
So if you are masked in a classroom, and if I'm a student, and Ms. McBeath is a student, and I turn up to be COVID positive, if we're both masked, then she would not have to quarantine.
Correct,
Yes.
yes. And the
But-
same with Ms. McBeath and I in this situation here, because if we're students, now adults, it's a different story. But with students, we would not have, I would not have to quarantine, or she would not have to quarantine, whatever the case would be. So. Close contacts, I wanted to bring this up because there has been a change. And I think one of the frustrating things for all of us that are executing is this, there continues to be shifts and changes. So I brought this school exception, which is what we've been talking about, in indoor K-12 settings, a student who's within 3 to 6 feet of a student who tests positive is considered a close contact, okay? Is not considered a close contact, I apologize. As long as both students are wearing masks and the school has other prevention strategies in place, which we do. This exception does not apply to teachers, staff, or other adults. That's why I made the clarification with Ms. McBeath and I, because if we're adults, we need to be 6 feet apart. And we're able to manage that because adults can control their space better with other adults. So when we have faculty meetings, when we do different things, we're very conscious of that distance. New, and this is of last Thursday, this was not being applied to buses. So on buses, we had to use 6 feet because the VDH, so there is a lot of pushback that goes on. So VDH in a superintendent's call said, you cannot guarantee kids are at 3 feet with masks on a bus. To which a number of superintendents, including myself, said, we absolutely can do that. We have assigned seats, we have cameras on the bus if we need them. We can assure you that they're at least 3 feet apart, just as much as we can in a classroom. Actually, more so, because we have a camera on these kids on the buses. So we were excited to see that no longer do we have to quarantine 6 feet. So if I'm positive on a bus and the bus is full, I'm taking out about 6 people with me in a quarantine under the old rules. The new rules, which we get to apply starting 9/9, and we are, is I'm probably only one other person that's gonna be quarantined. So, and if it's a sibling, you're sitting with your sibling. So, just really working through those nuances, trying to minimize the number of quarantines and the amount of time quarantined. So that's sort of the vaccination piece. Does that answer those?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
How many hours do you think that we are spending contact tracing?
Oh, man. I will tell you that the job of principals, assistant principals, nurses, and our clinic aides, one, we're very fortunate to have a nurse and a clinic aide in each school. This is the bulk of the time that they do. We still have kids who need to go to the nurse for medicine, need to go to the nurse because they're not well otherwise. It has fundamentally changed the job. So much so we're looking at our staffing models differently and looking at some of our ESSER money that we have to see, do we need to up staffing just to work through contact tracing?
And because we're reviewing videotapes of buses and all of that as well, so it's more than just the nurses and the teachers, it's transportation.
And depending on the kid and the situation, you can have a kid here at the high school who also goes to Chesapeake Bay. So now we're tracing in a whole different place because they spend half their time there and they ride a bus. It's just, you can have a kid at the high school that's halftime here, halftime at Chesapeake Bay, rides the bus here, also plays volleyball or football or whatever. The amount of tracing for that one kid is unbelievable, just to make sure everything's covered.
So with the current 80 people that have been in quarantine, what was their exposure? Was it sports? Was it cafeteria? Was it bus? Yeah, so is that, how? did
The
that
lowest
happen?
number is the classroom setting.
Okay,
But sports, a good chunk of that 80 were involved in sports, and sports was that piece. The cafeteria, which we continue to look at, is a big piece because kids are not wearing masks and we're no longer at 3 feet, we're at 6 feet in order to not have to quarantine. So we had a great conversation at the middle school about some different strategies there, but space is very much at a premium. So I would say the smallest we try to do is at the classroom level, but there are some classrooms that we're not able to achieve 3 feet. But the biggest areas being the bus. Bus will lessen some with this new provision, but cafeteria and then sports. We've had a number of sports teams that have had to quarantine, and we're not alone in that. There've been a couple games we haven't been able to play because the other team is quarantined. So every game we get to play like tonight is amazing. And we celebrate that piece to it.
Dr. Nichols?
Yes.
So when students are quarantined, explain how they're maintaining their academics.
Absolutely. And I'm actually going to tag in Mr. Miller, who's leading instruction for us.
Okay.
He and I can kind of work through that piece because it really depends on kid, the student, the level at what they're working. So if it's elementary, there's a solution, middle, high. And I have that one versus a kid versus a subset of a class versus a teacher who has to be out and what we do with that class. So it is a little nuance with that. Perhaps we can work up a graphic that kind of shows that might be helpful too for families and for the board. So
yeah, we have a one pager for our buildings and a graphic that we can get to y'all as well. But basically, most of it is asynchronous work. It is posted online. All the students and staff are familiar with schools. We've been using it for years with our staff. And we do have all content going up there. And so when a student goes out, they are asked to refer to it to get their assignments for the day. Teachers are reaching out and scheduling office hours with the students so that they can give any directed instruction that they need to give. And that's whether it's basically a small group or up to a class. And all of that is contingent on the student not being sick, so sick that they can't do work. Same thing on the teacher side. If they are well enough to work, then they are zooming in, and we've had teachers already who zoom in to provide lessons to students who are in the classroom because the teacher is out. And but as long as they're able to work, they're able to zoom in and they have those classes.
if for some reason we were to have an outbreak, say in a classroom. So an outbreak, just as a reminder, is defined as two cases that are connected. So if we do have something like that within a classroom, let's say 3 or 4 kids connected, and the classroom ends up quarantining, then we would shift that classroom to virtual at the elementary level. So lots of different ways that we attack that. Like Mr. Milton said, we have classes zooming in. I do hope that we don't have to shut down an entire school. But if we did, there would be a period of, depending on how long we had to shut down, asynchronous work, offline work, and then coming back up virtual. So one of the benefits of being virtual for a period of time last year is we have that information. We're familiar with Schoology. We've done those pieces. It's a little more seamless, but I hate to use the word seamless because there's nothing smooth about shifting a class, a kid, or a school. So.
Dr. Nichols, if a student's in quarantine, that does not count as an absence, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Miller, one of the questions that was asked is that the challenge with students in quarantine and being on a block schedule is that they could miss more than just their 10 days or their 14 days. And how do they kind of navigate or how to get caught up? Because they could technically be 3 weeks behind, depending on how their block schedule works when they're put in a quarantine. What is your suggestion to parents on how to kind of navigate that so they don't get so far behind on a block schedule?
First of all, is to definitely be checking it daily. Also, our staff has been reminded that, like, if a child is out on quarantine, to limit the amount of assignments that are going to them to those that are necessary, and to show that the student, to make sure the student has the knowledge and can demonstrate it. And so they're not expected to do everything they would in a normal classroom, and just what is absolutely necessary.
This would be a project that is not up and running yet, but something that we're looking at is there are several companies and actually a couple of universities that do on-demand tutoring. So 24 hours a day, you have a number, you can log in, you have that contact. We're working and looking at a couple of vendors now to see who can actually provide that. So that whether you're on quarantine or you're just struggling in geometry, you have somebody at the ready that can work with you during non-school hours or during school hours if you're in quarantine. So hope to have an update on that soon. Once again, that's another ESSER CARES related expense that we can utilize that money for, because that is not a inexpensive endeavor, but it could really be worthwhile for kids that are missing time or kids that just need additional support.
Thank you.
Yep. So, one of our missions this year, we talked about a big project under each strategic plan goal is that of communication. We've worked hard to revise our 4 Families page on our website, so you have a snapshot of that. The information that we're talking about tonight is located there. We've also increased the frequency of social media posts to include board meetings. We announce a board meeting, we share the agenda on the board meeting, and often we'll summarize the board meeting through social media as well. People gravitate towards Facebook to get information and news, so we've gravitated towards Facebook to give information and news. Weekly video series, which has been referenced, welcoming families back to school, just giving information as we get it. That will continue. I cannot promise you a weekly, but I can say that monthly they'll receive an update from me, because weekly they're receiving updates from their schools. So we're not trying to provide too much information, but it's all contained on the 4 Families portion of the website, which you can access readily from the main page. We have COVID resources for families, beginning of year resources, simple things like school arrival and departure time. So we try to put the things you would need the most up top. Just as a reminder, because it's catching on pretty quickly, but just for anybody who's watching or anybody who watches this recorded, we do have, through a federal grant waiver, free breakfast and lunch for all students. No application process. It's been a great benefit. We've seen breakfast specifically go up tenfold, and our lunch lines have never been longer. So we do get reimbursements for those meals. It allows us to continue doing the work that we want to do, or that we need to do in child nutrition. You're going to hear about a project today that this connects to as well. So just a reminder for families that we do have free breakfast and lunch for all students. You can still purchase a la carte items, but that is available.
I know it wouldn't be nearly as popular, but do we have healthy options?
Absolutely. Yeah. And these are, I probably picked the wrong picture.
But Lucky Charms and a Pop-Tart.
Now I know why my child.
There's a certain degree of whole grains that have to go. So the Pop-Tart you see are not the Pop-Tart that I buy at Food Line. They are the healthier whole grain version. They do have standards that they have to meet. Leslie tries to do it. She does a great job of making sure that it meets that standard, but it's still attracting kids. Kids are going to gravitate to that, and it still meets the standards by USDA. Anything?
The only thing I would add is students who are in quarantine can reach out, their families can reach out to the school cafeterias, and they will provide grab and go services for those families as well. That's awesome.
So we really do try to wrap around families. I'll send you, the sausage biscuit is one of the best things that they have going there. So I'll let you know what that day is.
Thank you.
Next steps for us, we're going to continue to monitor those enrollment trends, expand recruitment efforts for drivers. Mervin and his team have done an incredible job, but we'd like to get Mervin off the road, which I believe we've done. Refining our quarantine protocols. What you saw tonight are our quarantine protocols as we know it. I do have a state meeting tomorrow where I may receive new information, and as we do, we'll update it and we'll work through those pieces. And our spaces throughout our schools. A lot of this was theoretical, but until you have almost 1,100 kids in your school and you test the system, now we go back and we revise things. So that's where we are. We'll continue to adjust and communicate our plans as our guidance changes. So as things shift, and they will, you will know about it as we work through it.
In the spring, we were receiving updates from the Chickahominy district from the health department. Will that resume? Because it seemed to me that's really what's driving our mitigation strategies, because right now we're at somewhat of another peak in terms of transmission. So that would help us understand maybe what the trajectory looks like.
And our team is meeting with the Chickahominy Health Department on, I believe it's a bi-weekly basis. Now we've gotten, as the numbers went down, we weren't meeting nearly as frequently, but now we're kind of pulling that back together. So that data was extremely helpful and to communicate, so we can definitely do that. I know VDH was revamping their dashboards. But we can do that.
And I've figured out how to navigate the VDH website a little bit, but I'm not qualified to do anything with me.
Well, it made it easy when they sent it directly to me because I knew it was New Kent, I knew it was Region, and I knew, so absolutely. They also include vaccination data now in some of those pieces too, so I'll expand it to include those.
And are we doing any surveillance testing or anything like that? You know, we can still, or what are we doing from a testing?
Yeah, so we have not done, right now, what they offer is screening testing.
Screening.
So we have not moved forward with screening testing. Because even with the screening testing, the way they do it is you get a batch. One, you need parent permission, absolutely. Two, it's done by a third-party vendor. So it's not our nurses, and trust me, they can't add that to their plate. But then it's a subsection of the school each day, each week, whatever we decide upon. My issue with the screening testing is you do a batch, and let's say we do 50% of first graders at GW that have signed permission. That batch goes off, it comes back 2 days later, they say somebody in that batch was positive. And then we have to actually do another test to determine who it was. So it's not the most effective, efficient screening process. What superintendents are pushing on is that there's got to be a better way to support. So kind of looking at those pieces. We've asked specifically, could there be a diagnostic test? So if Brian Nichols comes in the clinic, he's not feeling well, we could do a test there. One, that'd be more convenient for families. It would cut down on travel, cut down on, and then we could rule out pretty quickly. Does Brian have COVID? Does he need, or is he having allergies or strep? Or all of that happens, but then it happens outside of the school and we lose time with kids. So we've not been given that provision or authority or what have you to do that. But that would be something we'd be more interested in, or they'd have to refine the screening process to be more beneficial. Yeah. So I wanted to leave the best slide for last. This is Splash. Splash made a number of appearances, including like a 102-degree day at the playground. So I'm glad I don't fit in that Splash costume. But it just embodies kind of what being back is. It's so good to be back. Is it perfect? No. Are there mistakes? Absolutely. But there's nothing better than being back with our kids and our staff. And anything we can do to stay open and to stay moving forward and to keep getting better, we're going to do everything we can to do that. So that's the opening of school's presentation. Be happy to answer any questions.
Moving to the next item on our agenda is BSBA policy revisions. This is our first reading, Dr. Nichols.
All right. So good evening again, board members. This is a first reading of policy updates from the Virginia School Board Association. So there are only 2 proposed revisions. And then once again, this is a first reading. This will come back to you again, and you have time in between to review those pieces. But you have 2 revisions. It's policy code AC, which that revision is a legal reference that's been updated to correct a typographical error. So pretty straightforward. You can see the red line with that piece. The next policy is GAA, staff time schedules. The policy was updated to reflect adoption of House Bill 7001, which is the budget bill, which became effective on August 10th, 2021. So that is in relation to comp time, and really it reverts back to what we were doing before. So really that's a nice revision for us because we're going to have to revise all of our policies around comp time for employees, and House Bill 7001 allows us to keep it the way it is. So if you have any questions now, I'd be happy to answer them. But know that you can reach out in between now and the next work session or ask questions then as well. So 2 very minor revisions, but we wanted to bring those forward tonight.
Our next item is acknowledgement of review of crisis management, emergency and evacuation plans. Mr. Hoffman.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, Board, Dr. Nichols. All 4 of our schools have submitted their crisis management, emergency and evacuation plans as tied to Essential Goal 2. At this point, we will have a review of those, which will be led by Allison Strickland, who runs our crisis management team.
This is just a quick question now that you just said that for that crisis. How does this change now when, for instance, I'll just use the example of a fire drill, correct? So how do we do these fire drills efficiently and effectively under these COVID protocols?
Yeah.
Because obviously you want to stay 3 feet apart. You want to get out of the building efficiently and effectively as possible. But do we have guidance on that of how to do that without falling into this category of a restricted environment?
It would mirror class change. Students being pushed out of the building, not literally pushed, but the staff would be moving students out of the building and trying to keep them spaced when they exit the building. And obviously, as we're doing this, all the students would be masked.
The other pieces we'd be under that 15-minute significant contact.
Okay.
Just like a class change is 5 minutes, it's not significant.
So that's our out, basically, of getting these emergency controls done.
And that'd be for all drills.
Okay.
That mirror that as well.
Good.
Next up is appropriation of funds, SMS and equipment purchase, Ms. Norman.
Yes, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, Dr. Nichols, some of the funding or the project that Dr. Nichols was talking about is purchasing a generator for the outside freezer at George Watkins. This will help us with managing food storage during power outages. We don't really have a place to store food in that end of the county. And typically we have to move food all the way back over to this end of the county. So that will be extremely beneficial to us. And also with the increase in our meals, it will also help in planning and preparing and having that food on hand. We are recommending that Leslie Smith is purchasing this through her fund balance. The purchase is $54,941. The lowest quote was received from Avis Electric, and we're asking that you approve this appropriation of funding and this purchase of this equipment.
And so this would, we would have generators at 2 schools then, or?
Actually, at that point, all of our schools outside of New Kent Elementary School would have generators on the freezers.
We did New Kent Middle last year.
Okay.
And then we did the actual freezer at New Kent. Leslie paid with her funds as well. So now it's the generator. The New Kent Elementary, 1, you have schools close by that we can transfer food to if we need to. 2, we're still looking at, as we build this new school, kind of making a significant redesign of New Kent Elementary. So the decision was made not to invest that money in a generator, which is quite expensive if we're going to have to pull it out. And we have a plan B. So.
Is there new generator slated? I had forgotten for the new school for Quentin Elementary for this food service.
Thank you, Ms. Norman. Per pupil expenditures. Ms. Norman, yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, Vice Chair, Dr. Nichols. Annually, we're to provide you with the per pupil expenditures for operations. Listed on this report is the 1920 state average and the 1920 actual for New Kent County, which is reported on table 15 on BDOE's website. So anyone can go and look at that information that would like to. I also have each item ranked, for the 132 divisions for anyone to view. We'll keep that information at the school board office. And we just wanted to make sure that we presented this information to you as required annually.
And the composite index, there's not been any major change.
There has not been a major change in that. No, ma'am, not for New Kent.
It looks like Ms. Norman is telling us about 21-22 fundraising projects.
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, Vice Chair, Dr. Nichols, we are required to periodically furnish the school board with an up-to-date listing of fundraising activities. Each school has provided a list for you at this time. And principals are able to approve additional fundraisers throughout the year. So we have provided those lists for you, and if you have any questions, you can reach out to us or the principals of each individual school.
I just want to make sure I understand. So the principals can add to these lists.
Yes, and they are able to approve fundraisers during the year, and we are setting up processes where Dr. Nichols is notified of the fundraisers. And we try to periodically and annually at the beginning of the school year, give pretty much all of the fundraisers that we believe are in the schools for the year.
Item for new business is our petroleum products agreement. Dr. Nichols.
All right. So we do have an agreement before you tonight for gas, diesel fuel, and fuel oil. This is a collaborative endeavor with the county. So this has been through the process for a bid for fuel. There was a bidder. The county has approved this on their end because we are jointly working on this project and always have. So fuel has always been a joint piece. So the county has taken this to their board of supervisors. Their board of supervisors has approved it. So the next step of the process is that this petroleum agreement comes to you as a board, and pending your approval on this, I would sign the agreement as well. So it has been reviewed by legal counsel, both on both ends, and it has been through the board of supervisors already. So it comes to you tonight for consideration with the petroleum agreement. So propane was not part of this, so propane can be rolled up into that. You will actually see propane coming before you just on New Kent Schools and at a future meeting. If not this work session, then the next meeting will be coming before you.
Thank you.
So I know Mervin participated with this process, but I'd be happy to answer any questions about this petroleum agreement or defer to his expertise.
So does the sheriff's department fall into this agreement too? So
Yes.
that's under the whole county umbrella?
Sheriff, fire, rescue, because everybody comes to transportation department for their fuel. That's why it's a joint process. So yes, sir. Yeah. All county vehicles, school vehicles, which would include fire and sheriff as well.
Thank you for that. We do not have any items under old business, so we will be moving on to our action items. Do I hear a motion to acknowledge the review of 21-22 crisis management, emergency and evacuation plans as presented?
I move that we consider acknowledgement of review of the crisis management, emergency and evacuation plans as presented.
And do I hear a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Do I hear a motion to approve the appropriation of funds for school nutrition services and equipment purchases as presented?
Make the motion that we consider the approval of the appropriation of funds for the equipment purchase of the generator as presented.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And do I hear a motion to approve the petroleum products agreement as presented?
I move that we approve the petroleum products agreement as presented.
And do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next is our upcoming meetings.
September 27th is our next work session, 6 o'clock right here in the media center.